Amy Fuller was quiet, kind, and careful, exactly the type of person no one expected to disappear without a trace. Dr. Vincent Ryland was brilliant, respected, and hiding a nightmare behind his basement walls. When their lives violently collided, it exposed a secret network of professionals doing unspeakable things in the name of science, and one unknown figure who made sure they paid for every moment of it. Amy Fuller was the kind of person who faded into the background in the best possible way. She wasn't loud or confrontational, and she didn't seek attention. She lived with her parents in a quiet part of Crestwood, Ohio, a town known more for its antique shops and fall festivals than for any kind of crime. Amy was studying nursing at Crestwood Community College and worked part-time at Pine Hill Medical Center, where she was known for being reliable, kind, and always ready to help. Her co-workers described her as soft-spoken and polite. She rarely took days off, never showed up late, and always walked home from the hospital around 10 p.m., taking the same path every night. On March 12th, everything changed. That evening started like any other. Amy clocked in at 2:01 p.m. and finished her shift at 9:47 p.m., according to the hospital logs. A co-worker saw her leaving through the side exit, wearing her usual navy scrubs and carrying a small pink backpack. There was nothing unusual about her behavior. She wasn't distracted or upset. In fact, she had mentioned that she was planning to stop at the gas station for a snack before heading home. But Amy never came home that night. Her parents waited for an hour before trying to call her, but her phone rang and went to voicemail. At first, they assumed she had stayed out with friends. That was rare for Amy, but not impossible. When midnight passed with no word, they started calling hospitals and the police. By sunrise, they were driving around town searching for any sign of her. At 6:43 a.m., her car was found parked near a gas station at the edge of town, not far from a wooded area that was mostly empty land. The driver's side door was closed, but the keys were still in the ignition. Her phone was sitting on the passenger seat. Her wallet was untouched, and her ID and debit card were still inside. There was no sign of a struggle, no blood, no fingerprints, other than Amy's. It was as if she had stepped out of the car and vanished into thin air. The police reviewed the station's surveillance footage, hoping for clues. But the cameras had gone dark at 9:56 p.m., just minutes before Amy would have arrived. The manager claimed he had no idea how that happened. Investigators later confirmed the wires had been cleanly cut from the back, something that would have taken time and precision, not the work of a random vandal. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. The town quickly fell into panic. Posters of Amy's face were plastered across shop windows. Volunteers organized search parties that combed the nearby woods, drainage ditches, and abandoned barns. Nothing turned up. No one had seen or heard anything. Local news stations began covering the story, dubbing it the Crestwood Vanishing. Her parents pleaded for information, offering a reward, but the days dragged on with no answers. 3 days later, the silence was broken, in the worst possible way. 3 days after Amy Fuller vanished, a delivery driver named Todd Hensley pulled off Route 5 to take a quick break. It was just after noon, and the sun filtered weakly through the dense trees lining the narrow gravel turnout. The spot was secluded, too far from town for anyone to hear or see much. He wasn't expecting to find anything, certainly not something that would bring a murder investigation to full boil. But as he walked a few steps into the woods, he noticed a flash of pink beneath a pile of dead leaves. Curious, he nudged it with his boot and realized it was part of a torn fabric. Hospital scrubs. He called the police immediately. Within the hour, the area was swarming with officers, search dogs, and forensic specialists. The patch of woods, was cordoned off with yellow tape as investigators spread out in a grid, combing every inch of ground. Not far from the fabric, they found a sneaker lying on its side. A white running shoe with a faint smear of what looked like dried blood. Then they saw the strands of blonde hair tangled on a low-hanging branch nearby. The deeper they went, the worse it got. At the base of a mossy incline, beneath a shallow covering of dirt and pine needles, the body was found. It was buried just enough to keep it out of plain sight, but not deep enough to fool a cadaver dog. The grave was uneven, almost rushed, as if the person burying her had been in a panic. The remains were badly beaten. Her face was bruised beyond recognition. Her clothes were torn and stained. The body was identified as Amy through dental records later that evening. What the autopsy revealed turned a tragic case into something far darker than anyone expected. Amy had been tortured. The forensic pathologist noted numerous signs of restraint. Deep ligature marks on her wrists and ankles, consistent with hours, possibly days, of being bound. Her fingernails were broken, as if she had tried to claw her way free. Multiple, shallow cuts lined her arms and legs, as if someone had been experimenting, not just harming, but the most disturbing injuries were on her face. Her eyes had been removed with surgical precision, not gouged out in a frenzy, but carefully cut, as if by someone who knew what they were doing. Her tongue was also gone, and the wound had been cauterized. Another clue pointing to medical knowledge. Carved into her shoulder, just beneath the collarbone, was a strange symbol. A circle intersected by 3 lines, almost like a compass without direction. Police took photos, but no one could identify what it meant. It didn't match any known gang symbols or occult markings in local databases. There was no obvious motive. Amy had no enemies, no secret life, no strange behavior before she disappeared. Yet someone had gone to extreme lengths to make her suffer. But the most inexplicable detail came from the toxicology report. Her body had been completely drained of blood. There was no pooling beneath her, no sign of internal bleeding. It was as though she had been emptied and then left there, discarded like evidence of something unthinkable. As the town of Crestwood reeled from the horrifying discovery of Amy Fuller's body, police struggled to understand who could have committed such a calculated and disturbing crime. Her murder was not impulsive. It had required planning, tools, and most importantly, a specific kind of knowledge. The surgical precision used on her eyes and tongue was not something a typical killer could manage. Detectives began interviewing everyone in Amy's life, starting with her co-workers, classmates, professors, and even old acquaintances from high school. But no one stood out. No one had a criminal record. No one seemed unstable. And no one had a clear motive. That changed when an anonymous letter arrived at the Crestwood Police Department 5 days after Amy's body was found. The envelope was unmarked and postmarked locally. Inside were 3 printed photographs, a small folded piece of paper listing 6 names, and a chilling sentence scrawled in black ink. They did some extremely shocking things to her. Photographs showed Amy at a bookstore near campus, talking to a man in a black coat. His face was partially turned away in each image, but investigators were able to identify him through background details and witness testimony. His name was Dr. Vincent Ryland, a tenured chemistry professor at Amy's college. At first, there seemed to be no obvious connection between Ryland and Amy. He didn't teach her classes, and she had never mentioned him to anyone. But when police looked deeper into his background, they found troubling signs. He lived alone on the outskirts of town in a large Victorian-style house with boarded-up basement windows and a history of 911 calls that were never followed up. Most were filed as noise complaints, but 2 of them, both from years earlier, mentioned screams coming from inside the house. Nothing came of them at the time. With a search warrant in hand, police raided Dr. Ryland's home. What they found in his basement sent shockwaves through the department. Behind a locked door, hidden behind a false wall, was a room filled with surgical tools, sealed jars containing preserved animal organs, books bound in leather, and dozens of notebooks filled with writing. But the writing wasn't normal. It was coded, written in a mix of symbols, chemical equations, and shorthand notes. With help from a forensic linguist, some of the entries were decoded. They described pain, tolerance tests, bodily alterations, and the idea of breaking a person's mind to reveal deeper states of existence. Most disturbing of all were hand-drawn diagrams of human bodies, marked with incision lines and notes about emotional activation points. One entry detailed the removal of sight to unlock inner clarity. Another mentioned silencing the voice to preserve the soul. These weren't theories from scientific journals. They were instructions. Someone had used these ideas, and Amy was their subject. The list found with the letter included Dr. Ryland's name and 5 others. All lived within 50 miles of Crestwood. One was a funeral director. Another was a former nurse. The others had ties to local hospitals and medical facilities. The implication was clear. Amy's killer wasn't working alone. Following the discovery of the coded journals in Dr. Ryland's basement, authorities acted quickly to track down the other 5 names listed in the anonymous letter. Surveillance was placed on each person, while investigators tried to find concrete links between them and Amy Fuller's murder. Most of the individuals had no recent contact with each other, but all had a background in medicine, science, or mortuary services. On the surface, they appeared normal, educated, working professionals. But when police dug deeper, connections began to emerge. They had all attended a series of off-the-record medical philosophy workshops held under various aliases. These weren't public events. They were private gatherings, always in remote locations, and never officially documented. The final breakthrough came when authorities traced one of the shell companies tied to Dr. Ryland's bank account. It led to a 40-acre farmhouse outside, the town of Meadow Ridge, hidden by overgrown trees and surrounded by rusted fencing. The land was unoccupied, its ownership obscured by layers of corporate red tape. Investigators believed it was used as a meeting place. When the raid team arrived, the building appeared abandoned. The windows were cracked and dust coated the floor. But inside, behind a concealed hallway panel, they found a locked stairwell leading underground. What they uncovered in the basement confirmed their worst fears. The hidden chamber was cold and silent. The walls were covered in black soundproofing foam. Chains hung from the ceiling, bolted to heavy wooden beams. In the center of the room sat a reinforced wooden chair, stained dark with years of use. Camera tripods stood in each corner, pointed directly at the chair. On a nearby table lay various surgical tools, restraints, rolls of duct tape, and vials of unknown liquid. There were notebooks filled with diagrams and timestamps, detailing how long specific tests were administered. One page listed Amy's initials, followed by a chilling note. Held 63 hours. Subject entered phase 3. Further inside the chamber was a refrigerator with several biological samples inside. One jar contained a human eye, preserved, in a clear fluid. Forensics later confirmed it was a match for Amy. There was also a small metal cart with syringes, labeled bottles, and latex gloves. Whoever operated in this space had done so repeatedly. There were signs of multiple victims, though Amy was the only one identified at the time. Blood residue was found on the floor, the walls, and the base of the chair. Some matching Amy's, others still unidentified. Police began arresting the remaining individuals tied to the farmhouse. Dr. Ryland was taken into custody without incident. A mortician named Henry Lowell was picked up the next day. A former nurse, Charlotte Mays, was found in a motel attempting to destroy evidence. Each denied knowledge of Amy's death, claiming their meetings were purely academic. But the physical evidence said otherwise. However, one key mystery remained. Forensic analysis confirmed 4 separate DNA profiles were found at the farmhouse, but only 3 were matched to suspects. The 4th was from someone not in the system. An unknown person who had helped orchestrate everything, yet remained invisible. The real leader investigators feared was still out there. As arrests were made and charges filed, the town of Crestwood began to breathe again, believing that justice for Amy Fuller was finally on its way. News outlets covered the story with grim fascination. The press dubbed the group The Circle, referencing the strange symbol carved into Amy's shoulder. While the suspects denied involvement in her death, the evidence told a different story. Journals, surgical tools, DNA and video footage recovered from the farmhouse. The public wanted closure. But just as the investigation seemed to be reaching its conclusion, the case took a darker and even more confusing turn. 2 weeks after the arrests, a local hunter reported a gruesome discovery deep in the same woods, where Amy had been found. It was the body of Henry Lowell, the mortician tied to the case. His body was mutilated, missing several fingers, and his eyes had been removed, just like Amy's. The same symbol had been carved into his chest. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was copying the exact methods used on Amy. Forensic analysis showed he had been dead for less than 24 hours. The timing made it impossible for any of the other arrested suspects to be involved. They were all still in custody. Someone else had done it. Someone who knew every detail of Amy's suffering. VI's pattern continued. Just 4 days later, Charlotte Mays was found dead in her holding cell. The guards reported nothing unusual. There were no signs of forced entry, no sounds during the night. But she was found lying on her cot with her mouth sewn shut, using surgical thread. No tools were found in the cell. Security footage showed no one entering or exiting. An internal investigation was launched, but no answers emerged. The medical examiner later noted that the stitching matched those used in precision surgical techniques. At that point, law enforcement officials realized the scope of the case had widened. The original killers were now being targeted by someone else. Whether this person was a survivor, a vigilante, or a former member of the group remained unclear. But one thing was certain: whoever was behind the new killings knew everything. They were methodical, quiet, and completely untraceable. Detectives re-examined all the evidence, especially the 4th DNA profile found at the farmhouse. A rush order for national and international database comparisons yielded no match. The person was a ghost. No criminal record, no medical history, no known identity. And yet they had been in the room, working alongside the others, sharing in the cruelty. Now they were eliminating the rest, one by one. Dr. Ryland, the last surviving member of the original group, was placed in solitary protective custody. But the day before his first court appearance, he vanished. His cell was locked from the inside, the cameras mysteriously disabled, and the only trace left behind was a blood smear on the wall shaped like the same circle symbol. There was no sign of forced escape. He was simply gone. To this day, he has never been found. Whoever orchestrated Amy's suffering has either been silenced or escape justice. And the one hunting them remains in the shadows, precise, ruthless, and still out there.